Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government for what reason it will reportedly not meet the target to reduce Scotland's food waste by 33% by 2025.
Minister Alistair Allen.
I am disappointed that, based on latest estimates, we look unlikely to meet our target to reduce food waste by 33% by 2025. The reasons behind this are complex and partly reflect changed consumer behaviour since the pandemic. Scotland is not alone in facing this challenge, and higher food waste levels have been observed across the UK. However, I am taking action to reset the Government's approach, and the Circular Economy and Waste Route Map sets out how we will deliver more targeted action to support households and businesses.
Maurice Golden.
Thank the Minister for that answer, but missing the target to reduce food waste is bad enough, but it actually gets worse. The amount of food waste has actually increased 5% from the baseline. Given that, does the Minister agree it would be sensible to include a feedstock mapping exercise for organic waste in the waste reprocessing infrastructure report the Scottish Government agreed to at stage 3 of the Circular Economy Bill?
Minister.
I'm very happy to get back to the member on that detailed point. However, I think it is significant to say that we are prioritising action to tackle food waste, and particularly to tackle waste going to landfill. We are making progress on that point. In terms of the specific point the member is making, as I say, I am happy to write to him about that. But it is worth saying that we have half the amount of waste going to landfill in the past decade, and therefore on the wider issue we're making progress. But I freely acknowledge the point the member makes, for the reasons I've given, about the challenge in meeting this year's target.
Mercedes Vialba.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Public diners are places where the public can eat and socialise, open to all, so that everyone can access good food as a public service. As part of its cash-first approach to tackling food insecurity, the Scottish Government says it will take action to support food initiatives based in communities. Can I therefore ask what consideration the Scottish Government has given to public diners as a means of reducing food waste and improving access to food? Minister.
Well, I think it's an important point, because 27% of food waste is created by businesses, and 2021 WRAP UK data suggests that hospitality outlets could save up to £10,000 per year per outlet by reducing food waste. And if there are innovative solutions of the type that the member mentions, which are particularly efficient in this regard, I'm very happy to look at them.
Thank you. Question number 2, Evelyn Tweed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to increase democratic engagement in line with the powers outlined in the Scottish Elections Representation and Reform Act 2025.
Minister Jamie Hepburn.
The Government is currently working on commencement of the Act. This includes its provisions enshrining the Access to Elected Office Fund, enabling electoral innovation pilots and empowering the setting up of democratic engagement funding. I will keep Parliament updated on our plans.
Evelyn Tweed.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Democracy should be representative. However, toxic rhetoric, transphobia, sexism and racism have become rife in political institutions globally. We each have the power to shape the political discourse. To ask the Scottish Government how it can encourage members to consider the impact of their words, especially on the democratic engagement of underrepresented groups.
Minister.
Well, I agree fundamentally with the point that Ms Tweed makes in terms of democracy having to be representative. I think, however robust our debates might be in here, and they should rightly be robust, they should be based in reality and facts and fundamentally in respect for differing points of view. I do think we have a leadership role in this place in terms of leading and guiding public discourse, and in that regard Ms Tweed and other members will be aware of the summit the First Minister is holding to try and bring together political leaders and civic society, and I know that he looks forward to all parties accepting that invite.
Thank you. Question number 3, John Mason.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how it controls budgets relating to public inquiries.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the cost of a public inquiry varies, and it's very much determined by the complexity of the issues to be investigated, the number of witnesses and the amount of technical expertise that may be required. Public inquiries which are established under the Inquiries Act 2005 are independent of government, and given their function to carry out an investigation into matters or events which are causing widespread public concern and to learn lessons for the future, it is essential that independence is maintained.
John Mason.
We all support independence, but auditors also have independence, and as she will know and I know, auditors have to work within tight timescales and on a fixed budget. So do teachers, so do cleaners, so do every other job that I know. And yet it seems that lawyers, if they can get involved in a public inquiry, have a licence to print money for themselves. Does she agree?
Deputy First Minister.
The Inquiries Act 2005 does set out a statutory duty on the chair of the inquiry, who is appointed by ministers to, and I quote, act with regard to the need to avoid any unnecessary cost. And we are keen to support public inquiries operating in a cost-efficient manner, and to that end we have produced guidance, Scottish Government officials have produced guidance for ministers and sponsor teams on the establishment of an inquiry, how it can be supported. That guidance was laid before Parliament in 2024, and all of us have a duty to operate within fixed budgets.
Thank you. Question number 4, Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to review the experience of support staff in schools.
Minister Graham Day.
School support staff across Scotland play an incredibly important role, and I'm keen to put on record our thanks to them for all they do. Our behaviour in Scottish schools research includes the experience of support staff. In 2023, we also commissioned Education Scotland to lead the Pupil Support Staff Engagement Programme, which gathered the views of 2,500 support staff on issues including workforce development and deployment. And we've committed to undertaking the next wave of BISURB before the end of the action plan period in 2027, and the experience of support staff absolutely will be included within this.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
I thank the Minister for that answer. I hosted a roundtable with support staff in Parliament last month and their experience was shocking. Some had lifelong scars, some experienced misogynistic abuse and others were going to work wearing panic alarms. For most, expecting violence had become part of their job, but they don't get support or the information they need to address it or help their young people. That is completely unacceptable. And according to the Government's ASL Action Plan, a review of how teachers and support staff roles interact and complement each other is complete. That's not what's reflected in reality, and they say they don't get the access to the same information all staff get, nor is it reflected in Audit Scotland's conclusion. So can I ask the Minister, given this, does he really think the work on support staff is job done?
Minister.
Self-evidently it isn't. If you look at the seriousness of the findings of the GMB and Unison work in this area, linked to our own research, there remain issues of unacceptable behaviour to which support staff are exposed, and that's one of the reasons why the CAB6 first priorities in responding to BISA was to provide £900,000 of funding to local authorities to procure and provide professional learning for the support staff workforce to improve skill levels and in responding to distressed behaviour in school. But Pam Duncan-Glancy is correct. There is an unacceptable problem here. It is one the Government is committed to working with in conjunction with COSLA.
Claire Haughey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Minister set out the importance of the work which support staff undertake in our schools and how the recently passed budget is allowing local authorities to ensure they are adequately resourced with support staff whose experience can help schools meet the needs of our young people? A budget, of course, which Pam Duncan-Glancy and her Labour colleagues failed to vote for.
Minister.
We absolutely recognise, as I said a moment ago, the value that the role of the support staff play in supporting learners, particularly those that are most vulnerable. That's why, within the budget, we've prioritised an additional £29 million for local and national programmes to support the recruitment and retention of additional support needs workforce. £28 million will be going direct to local government, with £1 million retained for national work. And this builds on the record high spending on additional support for learning by local authorities of over £1 billion in 23-24. Presiding Officer, supporting those with additional support needs in schools will continue to be a joint endeavour with local authorities who retain the statutory responsibility for the delivery of education in Scotland, and will enable us to build on the work being delivered through the additional support for learning action plan.
Thank you. Question number 5 was not lodged. At question number 6, I call Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government, in light of its reported positive impact on educational attainment, how it ensures that the education system provides pupils with a wide range of opportunities to participate in sport.
Minister Graham Day.
Our schools offer a wide range of opportunities for pupils to engage in physical activities both in and beyond the school environment. The Daily Mile, for example, is an excellent way that schools incorporate physical activity into the day out with PE-specific lessons. This encourages pupils to run, jog, wheel or walk daily. And of course there's the Active Schools programme, which is also free to schools, creating an opportunity for young people to get involved and stay involved in sport. In 23-24, there were 4.9 million recorded visits over the 262,000 active school sessions delivered, a 3.5% increase from the previous year.
Whittle.
I thank the Minister for that answer, but the erosion of opportunity for our children to participate in sport is directly related to poor physical and mental health, as well as declining behavioural standards. Sport gives children another way to express themselves, to achieve, to engender confidence, resilience and self-worth. Reducing those opportunities has consequences, like the 43% reduction in PE specialists in primary schools in the last 10 years, for example. So can I ask the Minister if he would rather invest in these positive activities and help prevent poor outcomes, or does he prefer paying for that lack of investment in poor physical and mental health outcomes and reduced attainment and poor class behaviour?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, we ought to focus on outcomes, as Brian Whittle has alluded to. Now, he refers to a 43% drop. That is in primary schools. Primary school teachers are generalists who deliver the totality of their curriculum, including PE. And specialist PE teachers are predominantly secondary school based, and over the same period that he refers to, PE teachers in secondary schools increased by 20%. And this helps ensure almost every school in Scotland now meets the target and provision of physical education in schools. And the reason I reference particularly the secondary schools is because in some local authority areas, secondary PE teachers deliver PE in their primary school clusters, and these numbers are recorded differently. And if we focus on outcomes, the percentage of primary schools meeting the target of 2 hours of PE per week was at 99.6% at July 2024, and that compares with a figure of 10% in 2004-2005. So whilst I don't disagree with them about the importance of the subject, I think the facts bear out the fact that progress is being made.
Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I may come to regret saying this, but Brian Whittle is absolutely right in terms of drawing the link between... I'm regretting it already. The link between educational attainment and physical and sporting activity, as well as the link between mental health, good mental health and good physical health. But would the Minister accept that it's not just about the availability of sport and physical activity within the school day? It's about the facilities that schools have that are accessed by young people and those of all ages within the community. And actually there's more that can be done to support local authorities in opening up the access, removing the obstacles to those facilities being accessed by sports clubs within communities like Orkney.
Minister.
I may regret saying this as well, but I don't disagree with Liam MacArthur on much of what he said. I think it's a fair point. I mean, it's not my area of specialism. I'm sure if he can identify particular barriers and impediments to that happening, the Cabinet Secretary would be interested to hear those.
Thank you. Question number 7, Michelle Thompson.
Apologies. To ask the Scottish Government what further engagement it's had with INEOS in light of recent reports of additional redundancies related to the closure of the Grangemouth refinery.
Minister Alistair Allen.
Ministers and officials engage with the INEOS businesses at Grangemouth regularly, recognising their role as an important employer of highly skilled people within Grangemouth. The news that INEOS O&P is considering redundancies as a result of the closure of the refinery is concerning, and we stand ready to support workers impacted by this decision. I appeal to the business to explore all possible opportunities for redeployment of any workers at risk of redundancy, and I commit to exploring with the business all routes to mitigate against any further loss of industrial activity and employment across the industrial cluster.
Michelle Thompson.
I thank the Minister for that response, and he'll be aware, and I've raised this point many times in our exchanges, that the closure of the refinery is significant, not just for those who are directly employed there, but also for the wider supply chain, particularly within the Grangemouth chemical cluster and beyond. Project Whittle is a vital piece of work that should give direction to investment, reassurance to workers and a foundation of the future. I know the report's been signed off by both governments, but is the Minister able to give a definitive date when Project Whittle will be published?
Minister.
Well, the member has indeed been diligent in raising this matter, which affects so many of her constituents, and the Project Whittle conclusions and recommendations will be made available via a public information document, and we hope this will be published next week. And we are working closely with the UK Government and other partners to finalise details on that. I look forward to members from across the Chamber engaging constructively with the Project Whittle outputs when they become available.
Thank you. Stephen Kerr.
The Minister says next week, but I'd remind him that we were told in this chamber several weeks ago that it would be at the end of February that the report would be published. And can I also point out to him that the Acting Cabinet Secretary, in responding to a similar question to the question that Michelle Thompson has just posed about the date of publication, said, and I quote, that the report was subject to final checks and changes, and among the parties that were reviewing the report was Petro INEOS. Now, can the Minister explain why Petro INEOS are seeing the report? This report is being paid for by taxpayers' money. Why are Petro INEOS seeing the report? And what other members of the Grangemouth Future Industry Board are also seeing the report so that it can be checked and changed?
Minister.
Well, firstly, by next week, I mean next week. And secondly, on the point the member raises about Petro INEOS, I think the member would be the very first person in this chamber, not without some justification, to complain if the Scottish Government had not been speaking to Petro INEOS and the companies involved directly in this matter. The report, as the member says, is a Scottish Government report, but I think it's entirely legitimate for the Scottish Government to speak to the companies involved.
Sarah Boyack.
Given we've now got the financial commitment to invest from both the Scottish Government and for the £200 million from the UK's National Wealth Fund, what is the timescale for getting new projects over the line so that we actually see the new jobs we need being created using the infrastructure in Grangemouth?
Minister.
Well, as the member refers to, there has been investment from both governments. On the 18th of February, the First Minister announced to Parliament the Scottish Government would lodge a Stage 3 amendment to the budget for £25 million to establish the Grangemouth Just Transition Fund, which will expedite near-term propositions in the here and now. And the Prime Minister also announced that the National Wealth Fund will provide £200 million of investment for new opportunities in the future for Grangemouth as part of a major intervention. So we understand that these funds from the National Wealth Fund will consider and will only consider investable proposition and monies that will be provided on a co-investment basis. So the timescales will be determined by those factors, but I hope the member will accept that both governments take seriously the task of finding solutions for the future and for the here and now.
Thank you. Question number 8 has been withdrawn, and there will be a brief suspension before we move to the next item of business. Thank you. The next item of business is First Minister's questions, and at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What was Nicola Sturgeon's biggest failure in office?
First Minister.
I think Nicola Sturgeon gave very strong leadership to Scotland during some really difficult times. She took forward a large number of policy innovations that have made Scotland a better country than we have been in the past. And I noticed that yesterday, and I suspect with the tone of today's exchanges, that there was a gracefulness in the response of Mr Sarwar, Mr Cole-Hamilton, Mr Harvey and Ms Slater about the service of Scotland's first female First Minister and the longest-serving First Minister. And I notice that graceless tone has been jeopardised by Russell Finlay.
Russell Finlay.
John Swinney appears to have misheard my first question, or maybe he just finds it impossible to pick from Nicola Sturgeon's vast back catalogue of failure. Exactly. So let me help him, and I'll start with Scotland's once world-leading education system. A system now more interested in teaching pupils about pronouns and feelings than literacy and numeracy. She is responsible for plummeting league table placements for Scotland, and she's responsible for failing Scotland's poorest pupils. She said that she would eliminate the attainment gap, but it remains as wide as the Clyde. Yeah. Will Nicola Sturgeon's Education Secretary, John Swinney, admit that they, together, have failed a generation of young people?
First Minister.
No, I will not, because it is not the case. The poverty-related attainment gap has reduced by 67% since 2009-10 under the leadership of this government, and indeed there is we are clearly seeing signs for the future about the performance of the education system, because we have a record low poverty-related attainment gap in primary school literacy and in S3 literacy and numeracy. And while Mr Finlay is working his way through the different aspects of the record of the government, of which I have been proud to be a member, and in which I was proud to serve as Nicola Sturgeon's Education Secretary and proud to serve as her Deputy First Minister, is there's been a 44% increase in the number of 18-year-olds from deprived backgrounds going to university in this country, and I'm proud that we've widened access to Scottish education.
Russell Finlay.
Well, there we have it, a First Minister that stands there and declares that he's proud of failure. And if there's a single word that defines Nicola Sturgeon and her politics, it is division. She pitted Scot against Scot in her obsessive attempts to break up our great country. But her fixation on gender has become just as divisive as her nationalism. The first ever female First Minister trampled on women's rights. She couldn't even bring herself to admit that a double rapist was a man. For years, the SNP government was distracted by this fringe obsession. Nicola Sturgeon focused on they, them, instead of improving public services for everyone. And she's heading for the exit, but John Swinney is sticking with her toxic agenda. Now that Nicola Sturgeon is quitting, shouldn't the SNP's gender obsession follow her out the door?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, during Nicola Sturgeon's term in office as the first female First Minister of Scotland, which I think is a moment of enormous significance for the country to have experienced that, she led a government that introduced the Domestic Abuse Act that makes psychological domestic abuse and controlling behaviour a crime. I'm proud that this government took that action to bring that legislation into this Parliament. We also took action to provide free access to free period products in public spaces. Nicola Sturgeon introduced... I don't know why they're laughing about all of that.
Let's hear the First Minister. First Minister, First Minister. Colleagues, I would remind all members of the need to abide by our standing orders. First Minister.
We also introduced legislation to ensure that there was 50% of non-executive members as members of public bodies. Nicola Sturgeon appointed the first ever gender-balanced cabinet. And one of the other things that she did that I think was particularly important is that she led the campaign against the despicable rape clause that was presided over by the Conservative government in London.
Russell Finlay.
He's scraping the barrel so much he's nicking Monica Lennon's period products policy. You know, it's because of Nicola Sturgeon that people in the real world have never felt more disconnected with this place and so disillusioned with it. And by any honest assessment, Nicola Sturgeon has failed Scotland. She divided our country, she betrayed women, broke her promises to pupils, launched a ferry with painted-on windows, raised taxes, alienated business, allowed drugs deaths to spiral to the worst in Europe, and even on her life's mission, she failed. Nicola Sturgeon tried to break up her great country, but we, the Scottish Conservatives, stopped her. Now, Nicola Sturgeon will leave amidst an ongoing police investigation into
Let's hear Mr Finlay.
Finances. Nicola Sturgeon will leave amidst an ongoing police investigation into the SNP's finances, while John Swinney still backs her toxic politics to the hilt. Yesterday's man standing by yesterday's woman. How can he ever change Scotland for the better when he's been at the heart of the problem for 2 decades?
First Minister.
Russell Finlay used the term scraping the bottom of the barrel. And that is exactly what Russell Finlay has just done in that.
First Minister, Mr Hoy, you seem to be having a particular difficulty adhering to the standing orders of this Parliament. I will not ask again that you do adhere to those standing orders. First Minister.
Russell Finlay has just scraped the bottom of the barrel with the type of toxic personality politics that have become the character of the Conservative Party in Scotland. There was not a single suggestion of how Scotland could be improved in that question. Not a single example of how the Conservatives, after inflicting 14 years of austerity on this country, of busting the public finances with that stupid and reckless budget that Liz Truss presided over, that Russell Finlay wanted me to emulate. Not a single suggestion of how to improve Scotland for the better. So I think the more the people of Scotland look at the Scottish Conservatives, the more they will see a party that is toxic in everything that it says, that is only interested in running down this institution, that is a direct threat to Scottish self-government. And what I will be proud to do is to lead a government that delivers on the real concerns of the people of Scotland and provides hope for the future in the people of Scotland as we trample past the Conservative Party in the years to come.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, global events are reshaping the world before our eyes. This is a generation-defining moment, and all political parties and both of Scotland's governments must adjust to this new reality and rethink previous red lines. This means a renewed focus on national security, that is defence, energy and economic security. I support the UK Labour Government's decision to increase defence spending. This will not only help keep us safe, but deliver more investment and jobs in Scotland. Scotland's proud history and present-day strengths in shipbuilding, engineering and manufacturing mean the increase in defence spending can disproportionately benefit us. However, our outdated skills system holds Scotland back, with business warning of workforce shortages and that modern apprenticeships are at their lowest point in a decade. Does the First Minister accept that we need to build a skills system that is fit for the future so that we can take full advantage of the investment coming to Scotland?
First Minister.
I do believe that, and that's what the Government is determined to ensure we have in place. So we work closely with employers to ensure that the skills approach that we take, particularly with the reforms on apprenticeships that we've undertaken in recent years to create foundation apprenticeships and graduate apprenticeships, to expand the range of possibilities that are in place for young people through the education system, coupled to the very close working between the business community and colleges around the country, is part of the approach that we will take to make sure that we have the skills that are necessary for the 21st century.
Anna Sarwar.
I welcome the First Minister's constructive approach, but the facts don't meet that reality, that position outstated by the First Minister, because the reality is much of the skilled labour in Scotland's defence industry is coming from abroad on temporary contracts because we're not equipping Scots with the skills they need. Grown-up, serious politicians must rise to this generation-defining moment and be willing to re-examine previous red lines. Our defence industry is worth £3.2 billion every year to the Scottish economy. It directly supports 33,000 jobs. But this SNP government's approach to Scotland's defence sector has been at best uncomfortable and at times hostile. And my fear is that while the world has changed, the SNP have not. We must all rise to this moment and ensure we are never at the mercy of dictators like Putin. So will John Swinney re-examine his red lines, support our defence sector, ensure our energy security and back our nuclear deterrent?
First Minister.
There are a number of points that Mr Sarwar knows my position on the nuclear deterrent. I don't believe that nuclear weapons should form part of the defence approach that we take forward. In relation to the skills questions, where Mr Sarwar asked me a number of substantive questions, the Government, of course, invests heavily in a number of elements of enhancing our manufacturing capability in Scotland. So the Advanced Manufacturing Centre, which is just on the outskirts of Glasgow Airport, is an important contribution to creating the opportunities for investment in advanced manufacturing. In dialogue with the defence industry, the Deputy First Minister met yesterday with the Strategy Board on Economic Transformation. One of the members there is Sir Simon Lister from BAE, and we're discussing the issues, the very issues that Mr Sarwar puts to me about the importance of enhancing the skills offering for the defence sector. So these are discussions the Government is engaged with. It's part of our duty to make sure that the country is secure and is safe. And the Justice Secretary is also bringing proposals to Cabinet in this respect, which will expand the extent of our involvement in areas around about resilience, particularly cyber resilience, where we face enormous threats to the country. And the Cabinet will be regularly engaged in updating the approach that we take to ensure that we're safe in every respect.
Anna Sarwar.
Last week, the former SNP Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, urged John Swinney and his party to reconsider its position on the Trident nuclear deterrent. Mr Blackford said that when the facts change, careful consideration of our response is appropriate. But rather than take this debate on, John Swinney dismissed it. At a time when there is a war on our continent and the world grows increasingly dangerous, the SNP's position is that we give up our nuclear deterrent now while countries like Russia hold on to theirs. This is not the time for rigid ideologies, but for serious, pragmatic leadership. Keeping our country safe should be the first priority of any government. But isn't it the case that whether it's on economic security, energy security or national security, the SNP's policies would make our country less safe and less secure?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, first of all, can I say that I welcome the fact that today we are in a better position, I think, on the resolution of the war in Europe than we were when we met 7 days ago, which is helpful as a consequence of the engagement that has been undertaken and which was the subject of a discussion that I had on Tuesday with the Foreign Secretary in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in London to consider the steps that are being taken. So let me put that point on record. Secondly, I think it's important that we have the defence forces and requirements that are necessary for our times. And I would simply point out to Mr Sarwar that there are nuclear weapons that are held by a number of countries just now, and it has not stopped the conflict that is taking place in Ukraine at this very moment. And what we need to have to be able to ensure that we can repel Russian aggression is to have effective conventional forces. Now, the conventional forces of the United Kingdom, the last government in 2014 promised to increase the number of Scotland-based personnel in the regular armed forces to 12,500 by 2020. That was not met. So I'm not going to stand here and take lectures from Mr Sarwar about the actions of the United... Oh, I know it was, I know it was them. I'm well aware it was them. I'm factually across the detail that it was them. I'm simply pointing out that I'm not going to take lectures about the actions of a United Kingdom government when that's the record of the United Kingdom government.
Thank you. Question number 3, Patrick Harvey.
After months of uncertainty, the Government has finally confirmed that it is now dropping the plan to help people switch to clean, affordable heating. Just as bills are about to rise again, the First Minister wants to keep people locked into expensive, polluting fossil fuels even longer. Scotland has already lost out on manufacturing jobs, building heat pumps. This is an industry that wants to grow, that wants to take on more people and invest for the future. People need help to make this change, and the industry needs clarity to make it happen. Both are urgently needed if we're going to catch up with the missed climate targets, cut people's bills and create green jobs. But as the SNP slows down on climate action, why does the First Minister think that any clean heat business would bother investing in Scotland now?
First Minister.
Look, I appreciate their strongly held views on this issue, and I want to provide some reassurance to Parliament today. The Government will introduce a Heat in Buildings bill when we are satisfied that the interventions in it will be able to decrease fuel poverty at the same time as they decarbonise houses. That's the commitment that the Cabinet Secretary gave to Parliament on Tuesday and which I reiterate today. One of the things that has changed, and Mr Harvey is absolutely right on this, is that since the original discussions about the Heat and Buildings Bill, the cost of energy has increased very significantly indeed. As a consequence of that, we have got increased levels of fuel poverty as a result. We need to take action which will decarbonise homes at the same time as it will reduce fuel poverty. That will be the commitment at the heart of the Government's agenda as part of our sustained efforts to fulfil our commitments on climate action. And lastly, Mr Harvey asked me about investors. I want to make it clear to investors that the Scottish Government is absolutely committed to our agenda on climate action, and we will support the measures and bring forward the measures to enable that to be the case.
Patrick Harvey.
Well, that's the opposite of the message that investors and businesses are getting at the moment. And the First Minister knows that the Green Plan was always for financial support for households and clear regulations. Both are essential, and now we know the Government isn't going to do either. If people get the help that they need to make this change, they can save as much as half of their heating bills, something most people would jump at. But at the same time as the First Minister is talking about fuel poverty, he's also going to be hammering everyone who rents from a private landlord. From the 1st of April, at the same time energy bills are about to rise again, the First Minister is about to permit uncontrolled rent increases on top of that. And he's proposing new rules, making sure that even the highest rents are going to keep on rising even faster than inflation. People can't cope with today's bills. Many won't cope with the benefit cuts that Labour have in store for them. Isn't it also becoming increasingly clear that they can't rely on the Scottish Government to protect them from energy bills or rent hikes?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, what I hope individuals hear is that the Government in its budget, which Mr Harvey has supported, is committing to deliver over £300 million investment in the Heat and Buildings programme. Now, that is a huge amount of public money that is being invested in lowering the costs of domestic heating for individuals, and that financial support is available as part of our financial programme. In relation to housing, the Government has committed to bringing in rent controls, and we will do that. The legislation is in Parliament just now. It is currently being scrutinised in Parliament, and it will provide that protection for individuals in relation to rent controls. And finally, there are measures and mechanisms available to individuals to challenge rent increases that they experience as a consequence of the existing legislative framework. But this Government is going further by introducing rent controls, and I look forward to Parliament scrutinising and supporting the legislation we are bringing forward.
Thank you. Question number 4, Christine Graham. Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what steps the Scottish Government is considering to further to ask the First Minister regarding any potential impact on planning legislation in Scotland, what the Scottish Government's response is to reports that the UK Government has proposed giving people living near power infrastructure hundreds of pounds off their bills each year.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government does not anticipate any potential impact on planning legislation arising from the UK Government's proposal to provide bill discounts to people living near electricity infrastructure. The UK Government's own figures suggest that fewer than 1% of households will be eligible for discount under the planned scheme. This Government believes that it is absolutely essential that communities can see a positive, lasting legacy from the infrastructure that they host. Scotland has made good progress on this already through our voluntary approach to community benefits.
Christine Graham. I thank the First Minister for his answer. Indeed, I think most people, if they were being offered up to £250 off their energy bill, would consider that a cheap and insulting bribe for them to agree to a pylon in their back garden. However, in terms of planning, in determining where, for example, pylons are to be located, could the Scottish Government make it a condition of any planning consent that those affected should at least benefit from local energy pricing?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, that specific issue that Christine Graham puts to me relates to energy pricing, which is a matter reserved to the United Kingdom Government. So there would be an interaction there that would have to be resolved. We do expect any transmission owners to fully consult local communities and the relevant statutory and local bodies regarding proposals for development before submitting applications, including pylons, and we would expect all of that dialogue to take place to ensure that the community voice is heard in every respect.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've been in contact with many of the campaigners who want fairer ways to transmit energy for their views on the £250 amount. One constituent, June, told me, "I think it's disgusting and another bribe for some people." She also said it won't make a dent on the drop in property prices. And another constituent, Vince, told me offering a householder £250 per annum is derisory, to say the least. So does the First Minister agree with June and Vince that the amount offered is a drop in the ocean compared to the tens of thousands of pounds people are seeing wiped off their property value? And will he do something that his ministers have all refused to do and come with me, meet the campaign groups that are feeling ignored by both of their governments?
First Minister.
Douglas Lumsden raises an issue in relation to this particular policy proposal, which is a policy proposal of the United Kingdom Government. It is not a policy proposal of this Government. And of course, Douglas Lumsden is at the front of the queue to complain when this Government raises any issues about the United Kingdom Government's actions. So I just gently point out the complete hypocrisy lying at the heart of Douglas Lumsden's question. The Government, of course, engages in a wide degree of consultation and dialogue with interested parties around issues in relation to energy transmission, and that will continue under my leadership.
Katie Clark.
The First Minister will also be aware of the concerns raised by those who live near wind turbines. Does he agree with me that the regulations need updated? And what more does he believe could be done to ensure that those who live near wind turbines get more benefit?
First Minister.
Well, I do favour the issue of people who are in close proximity to wind turbines getting economic and community benefits, and obviously that's been built into the schemes that the Government has taken forward. If there are specific points that Katie Clark is worried about the existing regulations around about wind turbines, I'd be happy for ministers to consider those proposals, and if she wished to submit those to the Government, we'd be happy to look at those.
Question number 5, Jamie Green.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what steps the Scottish Government is considering to further support Scotland's universities, in light of reports that the University of the West of Scotland reported a multi-million-pound deficit in the last financial year, with other universities across Scotland in a similar financial position.
First Minister.
The University of the West of Scotland wrote to the Minister for Higher Education in January regarding its organisational change project and its multi-year recovery plan, which is seeking to return the university to reporting a surplus in 26-27. The Scottish Funding Council, on behalf of Government, will continue to work closely with the university as it pursues this plan. I greatly value the contribution made by our universities. This is why we are investing over £1.1 billion in university teaching and research in the budget, and why we announced an additional £15 million of financial transactions for the Scottish Funding Council in February to support the sector.
Green.
Can I first of all pay credit to the staff at UWS, but also the 40,000 staff right across the higher education sector in Scotland. The reality is that the shocking news from Dundee University this week came as a real bitter blow to those staff. But it's really no surprise to anyone, First Minister. The state of university finances has really been a long time coming. 8 out of Scotland's 18 universities are currently reporting a deficit, totalling over £220 million. Now, this week, Chris Deering of the think tank Reform Scotland described recent events as a wake-up call, and I think he's right. He perfectly sums up what I think now needs to happen. Politicians, government and opposition need to come together and accept some fundamental truths. Their inaction will result in more jobs, courses and even institutions going under. So given that a quarter of university funding comes from public funding, isn't now the time to grab the bull by the horns? Will the First Minister agree to calls from right across the sector that now is the time for an urgent, grown-up, cross-party and level-headed conversation about the current funding model? Because our world-leading universities want it, they need it and they deserve it.
First Minister.
Mr Green knows that I take very seriously the issues around about university funding, and I also take seriously the points put to me by Mr Green, as he always does, with courtesy and with respect. But I do have to point out that in the recent budget, the Conservatives voted against the government's budget, and they voted against the £1.1 billion that we're investing in the university sector, and they put forward a call for there to be tax cuts which would have reduced the available public funding by £1 billion. Exactly. So, with the greatest of respect, I don't actually think the Conservatives have been demonstrating in any way, shape or form a grown-up contribution to the discussion that has taken place at any moment in this particular...
Members.
And I know the Conservatives don't like me pointing out these home truths, but I am going to... But I'm going to continue pointing out the home truths, because the Conservatives are absolutely
First Minister, if I may. This is no way to conduct our business. I would say that several members are interested in supplementary questions here, and I'm simply not going to be able to take everyone if we have this disturbance. First Minister.
So, Presiding Officer, the Government will engage constructively in discussions about university finances. We do that on all of these issues. The Government is immersed in discussions about the University of Dundee. I put on the record the discussions that we are having about the University of West of Scotland, and that will continue in the period ahead.
Thank you. I call Joe Fitzpatrick.
Presiding Officer, I know that the First Minister shares the concern across the Chamber about the situation in Dundee and the proposed job losses. It'd be good for the First Minister to put on record that, like I think the rest of us, he considers the proposals from the university to compulsorily sack over 600 people, 20 to 25% of the workforce, is absolutely unacceptable, and the Government will use all of its efforts to make sure that does not happen and we get a new plan which works for the staff, the students and the City of Dundee.
First Minister.
President Officer, I want to give Joe Fitzpatrick that absolute assurance that the Government is engaged deeply in the issues affecting the future of the University of Dundee. We do that through the proper channels that are required by law, through the Scottish Funding Council, which the law requires us to do, but that should not be mistaken for anything other than the fact the Government is deeply involved in these discussions to ensure the future of the University of Dundee is secure. I represent a parliamentary constituency that adjoins Mr Fitzpatrick's constituency in Dundee West, and I acknowledge, and many of my constituents are affected by the concerns that Mr Fitzpatrick has put on the record. And I find it deeply troubling, the plan that has come forward from the university, and the Government is engaged closely in finding a way forward that will ensure that we secure the future of the University of Dundee and it can continue the formidable work that it has always done on behalf of the people of the city and the people of Scotland.
Michael Mara.
The First Minister has known about the scale of potential job losses at the University of Dundee for weeks. He's not been blindsided and he cannot say that he's shocked. The question now is, when will he act? Today, Dundee's newspaper The Courier says, and I quote, "The Scottish Government's response thus far has been slow, evasive and utterly inadequate. Every day that goes by, the pain for families in Dundee will only get worse." So what is his government going to do in the next 7 days to take action to save jobs and to protect livelihoods in Dundee?
First Minister.
What the Government is going to do is exactly what I've just told Mr Fitzpatrick the Government is going to do. The Government is going to continue its deep and serious involvement in working with the Funding Council to support the University of Dundee. That is what the Government is doing. That is what the Government is going to continue to do to make sure we secure the future of Dundee. Now, I know that Mr Mara wants to have all of the details about what that might involve. There are a huge number of factors that are relevant here, not least of which is the role of independent financial institutions like banks, like the fact that the University of Dundee is an independent self-governing institution. I do not run the University of Dundee, and I have to respect what the law requires me to do in respecting the independence of the University of Dundee, which Parliament has required to be the case. Now, none of that should be interpreted as anything other then this issue is right at the top of my agenda, because I want to make sure the future of the University of Dundee is secured, and I will do everything I can to make sure that's the case.
Rennie.
I hope the First Minister does provide more financial support for Dundee, but whatever the short-term support that's available for institutions, can I just ask him to go over again on Jamie Green's question? I think there does need to be a cross-party discussion about a long-term financial model. The student profile is changing. There's global pressures. There's also financial pressures right now in the longer term. So can I plead with him to have that cross-party discussion so we can have a strong future for our universities?
First Minister.
Mr Rennie is in a stronger position to argue for that, because Mr Rennie was prepared to do the tough thing of voting for the government's budget earlier on this year, which, Presiding Officer, I'm not going to
hear one another.
I'm not going to tire of pointing out to the Conservatives the complete and utter hypocrisy of demanding we spend more money when they want us to cut the budget at the same time. They are beyond credibility in this Parliament. So, for Mr Rennie, I would say simply this. We are happy to engage on issues in relation to the operation and the future of the university sector in Scotland. The Government is engaged in those discussions with the sector on an ongoing basis. But it requires us to have a mature conversation about priorities. I acknowledge that Mr Rennie and his party have been prepared to do that, and I would simply invite others to step up to the plate in this Parliament.
Thank you. We'll move to question number 6, and I call Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister whether he will provide an update on how the Scottish Government is working to improve healthy life expectancy.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Government is committed to improving healthy life expectancy and addressing the underlying inequalities that contribute to health disparities. Tackling poverty and inequality remains the best way to improve population health outcomes and life expectancy, and the eradication of child poverty is my Government's #1 priority. The budget, which was recently passed, is prioritising action to address inequality at its roots, including investment in breakfast clubs, employability and developing systems to effectively remove the two-child limit.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you. Can I thank the First Minister for his answer? First Minister, Scotland has the highest obesity rates in the UK, which disproportionately affects our most deprived communities and harms the physical and mental well-being of millions. This hinders economic activity and costs the NHS millions each year. The Government consulted on restricting promotions of food and drink that are high in fat, sugar and salt. It closed in May 2024, yet the Parliament is still waiting for the independent analysis of the consultation responses. Can I ask the First Minister when this Government will publish this analysis and introduce vital regulation to stop Scotland falling even further behind?
First Minister.
The research analysis will be published shortly, and we're happy to explore the issues that it raises with Parliament. I think Callum Mochan alights on an issue where we need to be prepared to have a mature discussion about the issues and the questions that are raised. She will observe the debate as much as I do, that when sometimes these proposals are brought forward, they are met with ferocious resistance in that respect. So I'm certainly very happy to encourage a mature dialogue within Parliament about how we can take action to address the legitimate point that she raises, which will fuel inequality in our country and which is essential to be addressed to improve outcomes for individuals in our society.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last month, Aberdeen City, North Ayrshire and South Lanarkshire councils teamed up with Public Health Scotland and the Institute of Health Equity on the collaboration of health equity in Scotland to introduce positive changes at a local level in terms of health, life expectancy and quality of life. Can the First Minister outline how the Scottish Government will follow the progress of this collaboration and will he join me in encouraging a similar rollout for local authorities across Scotland?
First Minister.
President, we're pleased to be working with Professor Sir Michael Marmot and Public Health Scotland through the Collaboration for Health Equity in Scotland. As part of the collaboration, Aberdeen City, North Ayrshire and South Lanarkshire will work with us over the next 2 years to share learning from all parts of the system and test approaches that strengthen and accelerate action to improve health and reduce health inequalities. This valuable work will link into our upcoming population health framework, which will focus on prevention and early intervention, targeting action in the areas and communities most in need.
Thank you. We move to general and constituency supplementaries. Concise questions and responses appreciated. And I call Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Earlier this week, it was announced that the UCAN Sure Unit cancer facility at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary is facing over a year's delay before opening. Meanwhile, NHS Grampian has the lowest number of beds per head and the worst cancer rates in Scotland, lost its proposed National Treatment Centre, the Baird and Anchor units are massively delayed, all compounded by grave underfunding from this government. So will the First Minister personally step in to address his government's abandonment of NHS Grampian and provide it with the funds and resources required to get the UCAN Sure unit open?
First Minister.
Well, the UCAN Sure unit has been designed to provide rapid diagnosis for patients. It's intended that the unit will be taken forward within the existing resources of NHS Grampian, and obviously I'm keen to make sure that there is progress in this respect at the earliest opportunity. I would also point out to Mr Kerr that if he wants more money spent in NHS Grampian, then he should have voted for the government's budget, which he failed to do. And it's just another example of how the Conservatives come to Parliament, they plead for something and they're not prepared to vote for it.
Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scotland's north east is now home to Europe's largest battery in Blackhillock, significantly reducing the amount of wasted clean energy from the Viking, Murray East and Beatrice offshore wind farms, and providing an estimated saving to consumers of £170 million over the next 15 years. Meanwhile, research from Age Scotland has found that 3 in 4 Scottish pensioners lived in cold homes over this winter. Rising energy bills are continuing to heap pressure on households, and Labour's surprise cut to the winter fuel payment has added to the difficulties that many older people in Scotland face. Given Scotland's huge energy potential, and further to Christine Graham's question on this issue, does the First Minister agree that people in Scotland should see lower bills for their energy that we generate?
First Minister.
President Officer, we've seen an increase in energy prices after the election, when people were promised there would be reductions in energy prices. That's a matter of deep regret. And we also see that high energy prices are the single greatest driver of fuel poverty in Scotland. So these are the realities that people are wrestling with. That's why I think it's important that we invest in our energy infrastructure, and that what comes from that energy infrastructure is assistance to reducing the cost of energy for individuals in Scotland, so that the cost of energy is not the burden that it is today and as put to me by Audrey Nicholl.
Jackie Bailey.
The First Minister will be aware of the case of my constituent, Jagtar Singh Johal, who was arbitrarily detained in India for more than 7 years. He was acquitted of one of the charges at the District and Sessions Court in the Punjab, giving the family hope. Can I ask the First Minister what discussions he has had with Foreign Secretary David Lammy to bring Jagtar home?
First Minister.
Well, obviously we've had discussions with the Foreign Secretary on this question, and I personally have raised the issue with the Indian government when I was in India in previous years, because this, as Jackie Bailey correctly says, this matter has been ongoing for many, many years. Without in any way prejudging any proceedings, I acknowledge that the initial court case must be providing welcome hope to the family, and I send them my warmest wishes in the hope that that can be sustained.
Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government is doing to raise awareness, including in Dumfries and Galloway and the Borders, regarding the consequences for owners whose out-of-control dogs chase, attack, kill, which is worrying livestock, when accessing the countryside ahead of lambing season this year, given the 2021 Dogs Protection of Livestock Amendment Scotland Act, which updated and strengthened the previous law.
First Minister.
Well, obviously the work that Emma Harper has undertaken here is important and helps the situation. There are obviously other steps. The Scottish Outdoor Access Code sets out how to exercise access rights responsibly when walking dogs in the countryside. And the Government and Nature Scot will continue to promote responsible dog ownership across radio and social media platforms as part of the ongoing communication campaigns to promote responsible behaviour of dog owners. And I hope that will help in the situation that Emma Harper puts to me today.
Finlay Carson.
This week, a group of cross-party MSPs met with the Galloway Community Hospital Action Group to further discuss the real concerns surrounding maternity services in Dumfries and Galloway. Despite the warm words but empty words from health ministers, action still hasn't been taken to ensure that women don't have to travel 70 miles to give birth. Will the First Minister and the Health Secretary join me and the other cross-party MSPs in visiting Stranraer to hear the concerns of the constituents there?
First Minister.
I'm familiar with the issues that Mr Carson raises with me, and of course there will be dialogue and engagement with health ministers on this question. Many of these points are related to the judgments that are made about clinical safety, and that's in the Government. And I would hope this issue would be accepted within Parliament. The Government has to take seriously the advice that we receive on clinical safety around the number of births that take place in particular areas and the degree of specialism that will be undertaken. And the assurance I give Mr Carson is the Government will always consider very carefully the clinical advice that we're given in that respect.
Colin Smith.
Small has been on the waiting list for knee replacement surgery in NHS Dumfries and Galloway for 14 months. John is 87 years old. Last week he learned he'll be at least another 4 months on that list. First Minister, you keep saying things are getting better, but since April 2024, when you announced action to tackle waiting times, waits over 52 weeks for trauma and orthopaedic surgery in NHS Dumfries and Galloway have gone up every single month. To keep himself fit, John set up a thriving walking football group in Stranraer, working with the charity versus arthritis through his son Gary, but he's had to give that up. John is playing his part trying to keep active and deserves a lot better. First Minister, when will the Scottish Government play their part and tackle these appalling rising waiting times for surgery?
First Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to Colin Smith's constituent for the efforts he's gone to keep himself fit and healthy. I think that's a very good example that has been set. The Government has put in place additional funding to NHS boards to deliver more procedures during this current financial year. The target was to deliver 64,000 procedures. We have in fact delivered more than 75,500 surgeries and procedures in addition to the end of January 2025. So we've exceeded the delivery that was put in place in the original plans. As a consequence of the Government's budget and the work that is underway in the NHS Improvement Plan, we are expanding the capacity that's available within the health service. We're expanding the volume of procedures that are being undertaken and taking the action to reduce the waiting times that Colin Smith has put to me today.
And Ros McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will remember that I raised the case of my constituent Isaac Tucker, a 7-year-old child with brain disorder and autism. He was left with the development age of a 1-year-old. At school, Isaac was segregated and became distressed, and he was left alone so long that he banged his head off a wall to the point of injury. The injuries that Isaac sustained during that incident have left him with severe headaches and on constant pain medication, which he takes both at school and at home. Now, it's been a year and Isaac is still unable to get an appointment with a paediatrician. He's been let down at school. He's now being let down by the health service. So will the First Minister agree to meet with me and the Tucker family to see if we can actually get the positive outcomes for Isaac?
First Minister.
I'm concerned to hear the details that Ros McCall puts to me. I'll ask the Health Secretary to meet with Ros McCall to consider what more can be done to address this particular case.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a members' business debate in the name of Paul O'Kane, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the gallery to do so.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.